And hello, everyone. Welcome to the .NET Community Stand-Up. As is its regular custom, my computer locked up right before we started, so it's just waking me up every Tuesday. So welcome to the Razor team. This is quite exciting. So we have Taylor, Ryan, and Allison, and they're going to show us all the goodies of what's new with the Visual Studio. What is the official topic?
Yeah, so Visual Studio 2022 Razor Editor. We have changed so much. I feel like I have to make a nod too. Like, it's not just us. There's a lot of people involved in the Razor space. And another really big impactful person that wasn't able to make it here today due to time zones is David Wanger. If time zones aligned, we would have another square encompassing him here because he has done so much also in this area.
Very cool. Awesome. All right. Well, as we do, we will start with the community links. Some quite exciting ones this week. Let me see. I will share these out in the chat. I will put them up on the banner. I will fax them to you. Okay, here we go. So first of all, this post, Stephen does these like once a year or once a release, and this is like my favorite time of the year. I love these posts. So here he goes through in just amazing detail, benchmarks on all the cool new stuff in .NET 6. And oh my gosh. So, I mean, so neat to see all these things where just small things that look like they would be a small little incremental improvement, but because it bubbles up all the way through the stack, it's just like it affects performance all the way through. Here, let me remove the banner so Ryan doesn't get squashed because there, we want to see Ryan. Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is just really fun. So he goes through and just tons of benchmarks. You'll see changes in performance, a lot of time in memory and in code size. A lot of assembly changes, just like amazing stuff. One of the favorite benchmarks that he does in here is it's a string replacement on a bunch of text, and he calls his method the yell method, and he replaces all periods with exclamation points. So I don't know. Anything jump out at any of you on this? There's just so much good stuff.
Honestly, like it was very exhaustive in a really good way, right? It's one of those massive posts that you get once a year, and you just read through every little detail of it, and it just makes you want to go to the next version just that much quicker. And for me personally, like I was saying, oh my goodness, I write a lot of code that runs in Visual Studio. Well, VS is not currently on .NET 6, but I'm like, okay, I want to get there because holy cow, these improvements will change lives.
Yeah, it's neat. Things like here, PGO, which guided optimizations and like over time where it like profiles your application and sees, and then combining that with tiered JIT. I mean, just basically everything all through the stack. So it's amazing. I just love these so much. Pour yourself a big cup of coffee, plan to just block an hour on your calendar. And but yeah, I just love these posts. So another neat one here from David. This is short and sweet compared to that, but just a lot of other nice things bubbling up through the stack. So reading, writing files, random number generators. Again, just all these APIs that definitely help with any .NET application, definitely with ASP.NET apps. So
I think it's also worth mentioning too that even though Tobe did the whole .NET 6 at its core, how it got faster, there's a lot of things up the stack, like in David's post, that we've also been working on religiously to make faster. So it's not just the core APIs that are faster themselves, it's also the ones that we've built into frameworks. We're also improving their speeds as well. So I think it kind of cascades on itself, and you just get performance improvements just all up, which is incredible.
Yeah. Yep. I as an example, I just regularly things like configuration, or another one that jumped out at me was just reading, writing files. And we've been reading and writing files with FileStream forever. And it's so cool to see whoa, there's actually updates to this, no longer requiring a scatter gather and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, really cool stuff here. All right, so we're going from the super advanced to the more basic. This is cool. Jeff Fritz just released a series, Beginner's Guide to Blazor, Beginner Series to Blazor. So this is 11 videos. They're all, short little videos and just a great introduction. So it's cool. I love how these beginners series break things down at the basic level. So you don't have to, if you're completely new to a topic, you can start with the what is, So, and there's beginner series to Blazor, but there are other ones in this beginner series as well. And I don't actually see where to click on to get to it, but just trust me, they're there. So
I love this. I didn't realize Jeff had done this. This is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it just came out. So, and this was something we're also working on doing some Microsoft Learn things also based on the same content. Jeff is running that, and Jeff is in fact awesome. So, very cool. All right, so this is cool, just from Satish. So writing up defense in depth, and this is creating some middleware. So the idea with this, the problem he was solving was preventing too long of a request. So like if you have a large content being posted or whatever, that can cause performance issues or can be an attack. Now, there is a Kestrel setting that you could just set at the Kestrel level, and you could say prevent anything over this specific size. But if you wanted something configurable with logging, and he goes through and does some things with making it reusable middleware that's, you can completely like at runtime or based on configuration, all those sorts of things. So, I think the idea of using this middleware to do a certain thing is great, but also just the kind of steps through of creating reusable, configurable middleware with all the logging and all that kind of stuff is really nice.
I think it's one of those things that you kind of take for granted. Building your own middleware is so easy to do. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people just use what's included in the box because it seems intimidating from an external perspective. But once you start doing it, you realize, oh wait, really isn't too bad to do. That's really cool that they did this.
It's something too where I remember way back as I was doing before .NET Core, writing anything that was like middleware was really hard, modules and handlers and run into something and you want to do something just slightly wrong, and I was all of a sudden like, oh man, I have to read C++ docs for IIS extensions.
Managing event lifecycle, you do something just ever so the wrong event lifecycle, or something else does something in an event lifecycle. Next thing you know, everything you've done is just on the floor. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, very cool post, and looking forward to more from you, Satish. Okay, cool. Damian Bowden, again, kind of, I try and group these. I don't know if it ever makes sense, but I try and put posts in some sort of order. This is another one that's also security related, and this is looking at security headers. And so I called out, I believe last week, this security headers NuGet package from Andrew Locke. And so in this post, Damian's just kind of digging in some detail. So I really like this. These security headers are complex, and security in general is complex, but like understanding the problems and understanding like these different policies is tough. I wouldn't want to try and implement this on myself. I would like someone else to read and understand these policies and then take bug reports from community and keep improving them. So neat to see. And also a nice thing that Damian does, Damian's doing in here is showing how to test them out. So for instance, securityheaders.com, going through a CSP evaluator. And so these just kind of different tests. And then as he always does, links to, tons of links at the end of the post. I've worked on some sites where we were audited and started getting all these things with, security policies. And it's like, whoa, it's a lot to handle. So I'm glad that this package is out there, and I think just kind of a good standard thing to include. All right. Whale writing about micro front ends with Blazor WebAssembly. So it can be, it's interesting seeing different kind of application patterns emerge with WebAssembly, and it's very easy to just kind of create a big monolith. I've actually seen this in some apps I've worked with where it's just very easy to just kind of start throwing things all together. Also because of sort of the way that WebAssembly is loaded, that's kind of the easy path. However, you can get kind of a big bloated download, and it can really slow things down, your initial hit and that sort of thing. So references Florian's .NET Conf presentation on micro front ends and talks about kind of the pattern of breaking things up. And one thing that really kind of enables this in more detail is using lazy loading. And so the idea here is enabling lazy loading in a WebAssembly application and then loading things progressively or depending on where you navigate to in the site. So breaking up and making things more modular. When I've had conversations with Dan Roth about, some kind of just Blazor architecture, and he's cautioned that, once you start getting into this, it is more complex. You have opportunities to mess things up, with like AOT causing different, there's different things where you definitely need to test it. But it's a really powerful feature to enable.
Yeah, it used to be where you would go to a Blazor WASM app, and next thing you know, you need to download literally everything, and that was obviously less than ideal. So we started doing tree trimming to try and make sure we could remove as many dependencies as possible, but kind of going that next step and saying, okay, well, depending on what page you actually need. That's a huge step, right?
Yeah, it really is, and there's different. Like, for instance, in the .NET website, we have just a couple of pages that are currently using Blazor WebAssembly. And then as we're looking at using it more, we're looking at, do we create separate projects? And in this case, I think we're going to approach it more as a component library Blazor WebAssembly project because they're not super heavy. But I can definitely see as you build up to a larger application where it really does pay to componentize. And, All right, last one here before I turn it over to you. So Cesare writing about repeatable and clear tests for ASP.NET Core services. So definitely as you build up, more complex tests, the kind of standard is this arrange, act, assert. And if you have more complicated business logic, it can be tough to understand exactly what you're testing. What am I arranging? What am I asserting? What does it actually mean? So the structure helps keep your code structured, but doesn't make your code actually super readable. So Cesare went through and used Xbehave.net first of all. And so Xbehave is a plugin on top of XUnit. And you can write these kind of fluent things where you say, you define what the test is as a string. And then you execute it. And so you're grouping things based on, a more readable structure. So that, and one nice thing with that is then you get your test output grouped like this, right? So you actually see very readable, this is exactly what was tested, this is what failed or passed. So
I do wonder how dependencies are resolved for this. That's very interesting. I'm just thinking of a test failure, right? If it's due to something in your outer scope failing, I imagine that could be difficult to maintain state between tests. But it's a fascinating idea because we've always been stuck with the idea of you build a method, and you put underscores in, like a test method, and you put underscores in between the words as spaces, right? To try and describe what you're testing. This is definitely a different approach. I love the idea and the kind of the exploratory vision of saying, what else can we do?
Yeah, exactly. And really this is written to completely favor readability over, rigid code structuring, right? So,
yeah.
Yep. So because we're all programmers and can't leave anything, simple enough alone, Cesare said, I kind of like it, but there's some things I don't like. So some issues are it's XUnit, so it's limited to XUnit tests. Also, there's a .x extension method, which actually kind of threw me off the first time I read the code, right? So the .x is saying you define the string, and then this .x is saying basically execute the test, which is fine, but it's a little bit not super readable. And there's some other issues about grouping and structuring your code. And so he wrote Scenario, which is similar. So his actually is, scenario.step, and then he has his written as a bunch of separate steps. So, and in these, the await is more like obvious. It's a little, I can see, some, honestly, I think both would work fine, but I do like this when people take an opinionated approach to this sort of thing. So
yeah, it's kind of interesting because I know that at least in some of our like Microsoft repositories, we break tests up and do arrange, act, and assert. Like we just use common to denote that. But having the separate steps is interesting. Because it would enable you to understand which portion of the test is failing very, very clearly.
Yep. And one thing, but possibly to what you were talking about earlier, is the possibility of creating nested steps. So here he's showing creating nested steps and then making that easier to see exactly what part passed or failed. So so this, for instance, we've got like this first license key, and then there's steps within this. So yeah, really interesting. And I do like, then you can have these more structured outputs and integrated into, the whole test-driven development workflow and that sort of thing. So that is all for me. I love sharing all the community links. I will put them out in the chat again, and then I will stop sharing and I will turn it over to you folks.
Cool. Oh my goodness, so much love in the chat. I'm seeing so many questions asked, by the way, and for the people asking stuff specifically about the Blazor editor, I've read all of them. I believe I have, and they should ideally be answered in this in what we're showing off today. So I'll leave it for that. And I also have to give a nod. I saw a past friend, Build Started, mention me in the chat. Kind of a funny story here. Nearly a decade ago, when I joined Microsoft. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Nearly a decade ago when I joined Microsoft, we hung out. We built open source together, and yeah, it was incredible. So yeah, I felt like I have to give that nod.
Ben's always writing really cool stuff, and sometimes it's just he's constant. Every time I chat with him, we chat pretty regularly, and he'll always share like, I just wrote this cool library, I just wrote this whole website, and he's always cranking out really neat.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think one of the very first endeavors we did was I was building, for those who remember, Shoot R. It was using Signal R, a video game effectively on the web. I think it's even still up or something. I don't know if you know what happened to that. I rewrote it like 3 times. Ben helped me rewrite it like 3 times, and yeah, it was a fun adventure.
I just have to share one cool thing that he's built recently. I shared it in the chat. It's links4.dev, and it's. Ooh. I get a lot of information off of Twitter, but Twitter can also be super distracting, and there's all kinds of random stuff on there. And so he's written this system that kind of extracts links from Twitter and from some other places, and kind of just makes a dashboard. So
I love how the first one is my mom took this picture of our dog and also doesn't know memes.
So I mean, there is some semi-random stuff in there, but there's definitely like a lot of because he follows certain accounts and pulls in a lot of like really cool tech links.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's a good one to share.
Cool. All right. So whose screen are we sharing first?
All right. Well, let's play with mine for now.
All right.
All right, so so VS 2022. If you all have played around, if you have not played around with it, I would highly suggest going off and giving it a shot. It is our first Visual Studio release ever that is 64-bit. That's pretty exciting. Honestly, if you were to look into the internals of Microsoft, we have tried to do this so many times, and finally we said, you know what, we have to do it, and we did it. It's no small task. Every single one of the teams working on Visual Studio Extensibility is doubled down on what it means to build something for a 64-bit application. It's really, really exciting, though. Razor is one of those things. We have tried to rethink, what can we do? What can we make better, faster, more coherent, and really kind of fit the flow of developers of the current day and age? Razor was built a long time ago, right? And we really haven't changed all that much in the Razor editor because it's been okay. We have heard so many complaints about it, and we're really trying to solve pretty much all of those in VS 2022. Now, we're not perfect. We don't have infinite amounts of time, so we're picking our battles, but I think the goal is to deliver the best possible experience, and we are actually investing the time and resources to making it really, really good. And that's what this talk here is about today.
Sorry, but one question that
go.
came in, which I think, so there's a couple of people saying, what about Blazor? And I think it's important to point out, Razor syntax is used for Blazor, right? It's a common shared. So Razor is a language that's used across MVC, Razor Pages, Blazor. Like it is a way to combine HTML and C# code, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it just using it for MVC, web pages, all these other pieces like pre-Blazor, it's still Razor. And Blazor's another flavor of like just things you can do using the Razor language. So like we've extended the language to be, some things are kind of more specific to Blazor in a way. But yeah, it is the language, it's the course. So when we're saying Razor in this talk, it is actually applicable to not only like MVC and regular Razor pages of the past, it's also fully applicable to Blazor. And honestly, we're looking at a lot of the Blazor scenarios and we are trying to really think, okay, this is the next wave of devs doing brand new models on how to build like something in the browser, like WebAssembly, right? How to build a model that can work anywhere, whether it be Blazor server, Blazor WebAssembly. There's so many things that we're investing in the Blazor landscape that we are just trying to make it so the editing experience is just as coherent and as good and as fast as that. So that's what this talk's about, is what have we done in VS 2022? How is it different from the past? We have made tons of changes. And so we're kind of just like Allison, Ryan, myself, and David Wanger have just been really pulling it apart and trying to rethink what it means to create a really nice editor. So we're going to kind of pull it apart and go through each of the features one by one. So I always start little talks like this with this slide. I know slides are like, I feel like we have to do slides when there's a lot of people. You have to do some level of slides to orchestrate who's talking when. And Blazor is equal to Razor in the browser. Yeah, there you go. I love it. But yeah, so Razor tooling, I always use this slide because I love it. I find it funny, but I'm also corny. So that's just part of it. So our first topic is actually going to be led by Allison for completion. And I guess, Allison, we'll go to the next slide. And John, if you could swap to her screen.
Yep.
Sure. Thanks. So one of the top features users probably expect out of an IDE is completion. And in the past couple months in the Razor space, we've made quite a few improvements to completion. Lots of bug fixes, but we've also made quite a few improvements in snippets, item filtering, and override completion. So some of these are existing features, and some of these features, such as item filtering, are new features that haven't been in Razor before. So let's see here. So first, we'll start out with snippets. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, snippets are common code patterns that you can quickly insert into your code. So for example, here we're inserting an if snippet, and most of the basic structure is already done for you. As a user, all you need to modify is just the condition and the body of the block. So what's changed between now and then? So one of the big problems we've seen with snippets is that they're not super discoverable. So some people don't even know that snippets exist. And if they do know they exist, then they're not really sure how to apply it or what the snippets look like when applied. So there's quite a few problems with like this just general discoverability.
And honestly, it's one of those things that we have found. It is amazing how many people don't even know snippets. I'd be super curious in the chat for people who saw the previous GIF that Allison had no idea that was even possible, right? Like the idea that you can insert one thing and it spits out a whole bunch of code, but then also allows you to replace things, move your cursor around dynamically. A lot of people don't realize this is even a thing. And we've seen telemetry that like indicates this as well. It's one of those really powerful features that just not a lot of people know about.
Yeah, and the whole kind of workflow when you're this whole thing tab, it's amazing. And I use the prop one all the time. Like when I'm writing a class, it's like class prop, and then just type the name, type, tab, next one. You can crank out a class so quickly with that. So yeah, any love for snippets is a huge multiplier in productivity.
For sure, yeah. I guess there's just so many items in the completion list too. It's also just hard to notice that snippets are there.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to like kind of just rethinking how snippets work, we've also introduced a couple of formatting fixes for existing snippet issues. And there's lots of future potential directions that we're potentially planning on like taking with snippets. For example, contextual snippets, which I'll go into in a bit, and Razor and HTML snippets, because today snippets only apply technically to C#. So in terms of discoverability, looking at this for the first time, what would you guess that prop inserts? Well, as like a first-time user, you probably wouldn't expect that it inserts public int my property, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. There's just nothing really in the prop name that indicates exactly what it inserts. So that's one of the problems that we're trying to solve here.
It's kind of interesting, right? Because like, because I've seen in the chat, and John, I heard from you, you're saying prop is like my favorite, it's my go-to. How in the world did you hear of prop? How do you even know that's a thing? Like, do you remember when you're even told that was a thing?
Somebody showed me, or I saw somebody do it. Yeah, there's no way you would discover it on your own. You wouldn't accidentally type prop and yeah.
So it's like, could you imagine like for brand new Blazor users, Razor users, C# users coming into Visual Studio and trying this out? They would never know unless they went through all thousands of items that are provided to them when they try and get completion and try and insert them one at a time. And then when you do, like as you see in Allison's example, like prop is just there. Like you have to do tab and tab again for that even to happen. Like it's not even just inserting, you also have to know what to do.
Yeah.
Sorry to kind of hijack you there, Allison.
No, it's completely true. It's one of the, and that's a difficult thing with a lot of, I complain about, like phone features and a lot of, like features that are magical, but there's no way you could know it was there without someone telling you or, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess just to start addressing these problems, there's a couple of things that we've been doing. We still have lots of room for improvement as well, but we started separating out the items in the completion list. So for example, in the old editor, there used to be only one item in the list that encompassed both the keyword and the snippet for 4. But now we've separated it out into 2 items. So one is for the keyword, the first one, and the second one is for the snippet, and it contains like parentheses, ... paren. That kind of hopefully indicates that there's something more being inserted rather than just the keyword. You also, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but what does so you've got the completion for, what is the first one? What is the point of the first one, the keyword in the completion list? Like it'll just finish typing the OR for me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not super helpful, but
well, no, I want to understand. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay.
I think also like if you have 4 each is longer than 4, right? So I think as you get to the longer ones, you want that auto completion more.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So what 1 tab used to insert just the keyword, and 2 tabs used to insert the snippet.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we have experimented with just having 2 separate items and just having 1 tab insert each item. So hopefully it's a lot more discoverable than just knowing you have to press 2 tabs to insert a snippet. Mm-hmm. So we have more improvements planned. This is just like what we've preliminarily done to improve snippets. A future improvement that hasn't yet been implemented, but what we're looking at potentially doing in the future is be smarter about where we offer snippets. So for example, we offer the prop snippet today in a method, which technically isn't valid. With our new LSP-based editor, we should be able to hopefully offer contextual snippets. So that's something we're looking into doing.
And this is like not just prop, this is like every single snippet known. You have all of them offered to you all the time, effectively bloating your completion list, which is obviously less than ideal. So
that reminds me of, there's like IntelliCode and there's some other things in Visual Studio where it kind of like uses this AI and understands more of what you're trying to do. Is that something where along the way that like with the LSP based editor and that sort of thing, it can continue to improve that?
It's
like
funny.
Filtering is definitely like the huge win, right? Like don't even show me prop if it's not valid. But like I do wonder even like I'd love to see those little stars on there, at some point.
John, that's a brilliant question, and we've thought about this a lot actually internally, where the idea of a snippet being contextually available immediately ties into, okay, well, can I just make my IntelliCode type experience more aware and more knowledgeable? And the answer is, for some of these things, yeah, absolutely. We probably won't be able to insert like an entire method like IntelliCode can, like with all the context included, but we could probably give you the groundwork for that method. We can probably give you a place to replace the name and then get you instantly into the body. So that is something that we are investigating in. And as I think I really want to act what Allison is saying, this is an experiment. We are trying out different ways to make it so these become more powerful features so more people know about them. And so for instance, in this example, if Allison were to have hit prop, like it commit it with a tab, we're instantly in the snippet session. There's no tab anymore because there's no reason for it to be that way, right? It's a snippet. Like you type some random keyword prop and one tab is plenty to get you into that flow, right? Yeah. So it's one of those things where because we can be contextual, it opens the doors for all sorts of other improvements.
Cool.
Yeah, so great points there. So in addition to snippets, we've also been doing a lot of work with item filtering. So this is a new feature in Razor, and it's actually taken from C#, and it allows users to filter items in the completion list. And since this is super popular in C#, we decided to also bring it over to Razor. So the item filtering is just this part highlighted in red here, which allows you to just filter by, for example, like methods, interfaces, etc. So as you can see here, this is the before and after. The old Razor editor, we didn't have this item filtering, but now we do. And here is item filtering in action. So we can now filter by tag helpers and elements or multiple filters at the same time. So hopefully this just allows users to find items they're looking for more quickly.
That looks really useful to me. I've been doing more Razor Pages dev lately, and it's so much that you can do on Razor Pages, right? Or Razor, because you've got C#, you've got HTML, depending on the scope, you've got JavaScript or CSS. And so like filtering things down as much as possible looks really useful.
Oh, sorry, Taylor, were you saying something?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I wasn't saying anything.
I was going to respond
so
to something in the chat, that's all.
Go ahead. I wasn't really saying anything.
I was just going to respond to a question in the chat if this section was done. That's all.
Yeah, the section's pretty much done.
All right. So in the chat there was a question of, I see a lot of people saying, is tab gone? So for the Razor editor, actually, in VS 2022, the tab will be gone initially. Now, I know that's a controversial question. This is a temporary thing. We do plan to re-add tab for the if and for each. Prop itself will not have tab. There's no plan to bring tab back to prop. It should just be you inserted prop. There's no reason to have a second tab included in that gesture. So that is our current plan, and that's kind of how the state of the world is expected to land. So temporarily, tab gone for and if and those things, and then we should be able to re-add those shortly after.
So moving on from that, the last thing that I want to discuss about completion is override completion. So in the new editor, we've made it much more usable. So override completion did exist in the old editor, but it was like pretty buggy and messed up formatting, and even occasionally used to delete code. So as you can see in this example here, on the left, the formatting is pretty messed up in the old editor, and on the right, it's more along the lines of what a user would probably expect when they commit the item.
Oh my gosh, Allison, I just realized, look, on the left one, in the old editor, it's actually broken code. It's not even valid, right? There's no public in front of it. I didn't even realize that was the case.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize that either.
Yeah.
Oh geez.
Yeah. Well, hey, we fixed it. But yeah, that's a funny thing to see in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the experience is much more seamless now. Definitely let us know if you see any bugs through reporting on our GitHub page with override completion or any of these different features. So moving on from completion. Oh, John, were you going to say something?
No, I'm just, there's a comment on, and I was honestly thinking this myself. If you've got that muscle memory of tab, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if I should be worried about that.
Well, so no, it is. It's actually is something that you should be worried about. And it's something that we do want to bring back. Now, the prop tab, that is, it's a wasted keystroke in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense. People can prove me wrong if the tab is meant to be there and they want to have that. And we can go ahead and do the same exact thing we did in the old keyword, where we have prop as one that you just magically insert this random string and hit tab again to expand it out. We could totally do that and add a separate one underneath it that represents the public, like int my property name, blah, blah, blah. That's possible. I think right now, it's not that we chose not to do it. It's that we just didn't have time to do it. That's fair. Yep. And to be very specific, by the way, this is just in Razor. This is not in C# yet. We are trying things out in the Razor experience because these we have the ability to do this at a very low cost. We have the flexibility to do it, and so that's where it is currently.
Cool.
Nice. So moving on from completion, now I want to talk a little bit about settings. So in the new Razor editor, we have a new Razor settings panel under Tools, Options. And this adds a couple settings like line numbers, virtual space, etc. But the big one that it adds that a lot of users have asked for, and I know is a very hot button topic, is tabs versus spaces. So I have a quick demo that I'm going to just switch my screen to share. Okay, so now in the new Razor editor, if you go to Tools, Options, you can see under Text Editor, we now have this new Razor panel that has a couple of options like line numbers, scroll bars, and tabs versus spaces. So our old Razor editor, we used to have our options contained under HTML, which didn't really make a ton of sense. So it definitely makes more sense to have it out into its own section. And note that this only applies to ASP.NET Core, does not apply to any other type of projects. So for example, here I can like toggle on and off line numbers and have that apply. But the big one is tabs versus spaces. So
that was actually mentioned too in the chat. But this is what I was saying. Someone was saying, "What about my tabs? Where are they?" And I'm like, "Oh goodness, this is a great segue into what we're going to show."
Yeah, for sure. So for example, the default is spaces, but if I wanted to switch to tabs, I could. This file by default is already formatted with spaces. We're not automatically going to change that for you. But if I were to add a new Razor component, for example, to my project, it's now generated with tabs instead of spaces. And if you wanted to change your existing file to spaces or to tabs, you could just do that on the bottom right here and have it apply as well. So you can see that we now have tabs.
I mean, I'm not going to officially join any team, but this has markedly improved the code very, very much. No, that's really nice.
Are you see, there are tab lovers, there are spaces lovers, and they both view each other as totally wrong, and that's okay. Right. We live in a world where there's different opinions.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess everyone in the chat is trying to guess what team you're on. We cannot pick teams.
Okay,
tabs and spaces are, John. We can't pick teams. They are on an individual basis. Each person
is a unique, wonderful.
They are.
Yeah.
Create a poll. I would actually creating a poll would actually be very interesting to see overall in the community, where do people lie. And I think there's a difference. Like, what do you prefer versus like what is right? In my opinion, preference, it shouldn't matter. People can prefer tabs or spaces, and it's okay. Everything compresses down basically the same anyways. So, yeah. Or
you can use Unicode.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, exactly. You know, just got to throw that Unicode in there. Yep. Oh my God. HoloLens app that converts tabs to spaces when viewing coded VS. Yes. It's just for your viewing pleasure.
Yes. That's very cool.
Yeah, I'm glad we finally have this in. It was a very requested feature.
So before we go to the next section real fast, there was a few questions we should probably answer in chat before we get too far off the line here. I don't know if you have been capturing them, John, but if not, I can kind of scroll back up.
Yeah, I mean, if you call them out, I think I can probably click on a lot of them.
Okay, got it. So Okay, so one of the questions was like the biggest problem they have with the editor is that it slows way down when you get to bigger files. Yeah, we totally get that. We're actually changing that a lot. One of the things we are doing with this new VS 2022 editor is we are taking the approach of we're not going to stall and hang your IDE if you have too big of a file for us. In the worst case, we'll degrade other experiences if we can't keep up. But we're also making huge perf improvements and making sure we can keep up. So ideally, we can always keep up, right? But there are like, if someone has like a gig file, there's no chance we're going to keep up with a gig file, right? I'm sorry, there's zero chance. It's going to explode literally everything. But in scenarios that are extra, is what I'll call it, we are degrading to make it so that maybe we don't provide completion as often. We are not trying to obstruct what you're typing, is the gist, and trying to make it so you can just type very fluently, and that's like our number one big thing. And there was another comment for filtering by eraser component seems very useful. Totally, it also works for the attributes as well. There's another question asking, can you filter by hotkey? And the answer is yes, you can. There is if you hover over the filters, there it shows the hotkeys. I believe it's Alt-H for tag helpers, and I forget the one for HTML. But yes, there are hotkeys associated with the filters, which is nice. Let's see.
Just to make sure I feel like you kind of made it sound like we were only making sure that the experience didn't degrade, but we've also done a lot of work to make it faster, even for the large files.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
We go into that a little bit in my section later on, but I just wanted to call it out now. We're working it from all angles.
Yes. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, definitely. Whether the filter is persistent or belongs to that appeared list only. It belongs to that appeared list only. It is not persistent. I think was that everything? Will code formatting be improved? We'll get to that in a bit. Do not worry. Oh my goodness, you all have so many questions. I'm trying my best to dig through this before we move forward.
There's spaces. A lot, yeah.
I think the tabs versus spaces conversation.
Yeah, it all went off the rails there.
Yeah, it all went off the rails. Okay, I'm gonna leave it. I don't think I'm missing anything. Oh gosh, as I'm scrolling, it's loading more. Okay, I think that's it.
So one thing to help is if you have a question you'd like answered, just put like #question at the beginning. And then I'll try. We can use those to filter down a little bit because there's also a lot of just discussion, right? But so if you can throw that #question at the beginning,
cool.
Then I'll use that.
Yeah, I think we got everything. If we didn't get it, repost your question with that #question at the beginning, and we'll make sure to answer it.
Cool.
Okay, awesome. Right. Great questions.
Yes.
So the last feature I wanted to show off is live share. And I believe this might have been discussed at a previous or possibly shown off at a previous showcase as well. But we'll just show it off again. So live share just allows you to collaborate and edit code with others in live time. So I started a live share session up here, and it'll just automatically generate a link. And I'm going to invite Taylor and Ryan to this session.
Ooh. Let's see.
Sharing the chat with them.
Okay, copy link. And keep in mind, like this is one of those things that in the old editor, you got zero experience in live share. Like in the 2019 editor. And VS 2022, that you basically get a coherent experience no matter where you are. So like Ryan and I have full experience, full colorization as Allison does. It's truly like no different, which is quite nice. We can do all sorts of cool things.
Who did that?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Oh geez. Okay.
Yep. But it can do all sorts of things, and we can destroy documents if we want to. We can. You have full control. It's fantastic.
Wow.
So, yeah. Whatever changes I make, I think Ryan and Taylor should be able to see them too.
Yep.
Hopefully. Uh-oh, yep. Just totally messed up right now.
Well, I see.
From this. What is it? Oh.
It's just injecting in a whole bunch of code is fantastic.
Yeah. Boosting productivity.
Amazing productivity. Yes. So when in doubt, insert randomness to it. But yes.
And LiveShare is powered by the Language Server Protocol, which is also what powers our new editor. And we discussed it at our showcase back in January, in case anyone wants to go back and take a look at that. Cool. And that's all I had.
I forget, honestly. LiveShare is at what level is that? Is that pro or community? I forget.
I actually forget also. That's a great question. I really don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I'm so sorry. I do not have an answer for that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure either, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then there was a question that someone was saying they have no IntelliSense in their Visual Studio 2022 project at all for Blazor. That's a problem. Those are things we absolutely want to hear about. And if we are falling over in some way, we need to resolve that. The greatest way to do that is to report a problem in VS. And Alice, would you mind clicking next?
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
So that little send feedback button right there, if you click it, there's a report a problem. Clicking this is going to go ahead and open up a web browser for you. It'll provide all sorts of logs that we need to really understand your issue. The more you can provide us, the better we can kind of get to the bottom of it. And ideally, that shouldn't happen. There were some issues in Preview 2 of Visual Studio that, or actually, I think it was even in Preview. No, it's just Preview 2, where there was no experience. And this happened to do with content items, not including Razor files at all. We fixed that in Preview 3. So there's a good chance that you fall into that category. If not, though, we want to make sure that we can at least understand what's going on.
One bug which completely blocked some experiences was having a space or a plus sign in your path, which I know seems really random, but it happens. So we have fixes out for that. But yes, do check if that fixes you, but do definitely use the report a problem button so that we can fix it for everyone.
Yep. Cool. And is there another question?
So I'm verifying, but Neil said LiveShare is for everyone. So,
cool.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and that's actually another piece to this puzzle too, by the way. Because we are now fully language server protocol, you can actually go cross IDE if you want to, which is pretty sweet. So VS, cool, yeah. Yep, VS to VS Code. So it doesn't matter what IDE you're working in. If it has LiveShare, it works.
Which is a neat feature, as you're saying, with LiveShare, just to make sure people got that. So like Allison could have created this in VS 2022 and shared it to me, and I've just got VS Code and I'm on a Linux machine or whatever, or Mac, and I pop it open and that still continues to work with LiveShare in VS Code. So.
Very cool.
Pretty cool stuff.
All right.
Okay. I think Ryan.
Just to make sure I feel like we can't repeat this enough, that report a problem or suggestion in Visual Studio really, really, really helps us because it does a lot of things. It lets us know like what build you're using. It lets us know if you've got any kind of, it can allow you to submit like a stack trace if you get an exception. It also goes into our system and says like, 20 people reported this same problem on the same build, and it helps prioritize. And so it actually goes directly into our bug tracking systems. So while it may be tempting to like complain on Twitter or to email somebody or whatever, this is by far the most productive way to let us know of a problem with Visual Studio.
Got it.
Rant over.
There was another great question in chat about how can I test VS 2022 if it is now not, I'm assuming it's not allowed to be used with production code and for all my projects. So it's actually new to me that they were saying that it's not allowed to be used for production code. I think you're not allowed to, it's not encouraged to publish from VS 2022. Editing is truly just editing in a sense, but I could be wrong there. I would not be the subject matter in that expert. If we're saying you can't edit your production code, that I guess that would absolutely be a blocker.
So sometimes when we say that, like whether something has a go live license or whatever, I haven't seen that either with Visual Studio 2022. But when we say that, a lot of the time what we're saying is it's not officially supported, meaning like if you file a support ticket or whatever, if you have like enterprise support agreement or that sort of thing will say, oh, okay, you're using a preview edition. We can't give you that same level of support. But in general, like you're saying, it's a code editor, it's a developer tool, and so you should be able to. And also, Visual Studio 2022 is side by side. Nothing that you're showing here would cause it. Like if I have a problem with VS 2022, close it, open it in VS 2019, and keep going. Right?
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly what I would do, actually. Ideally, though, before you close it, report a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And honestly, report a problem. We will do nothing. We don't know about it if you don't report it. Like, yes, there's a chance it's a duplicate. Honestly, more often than not, it's not a duplicate in my experience. So coding's hard. Yeah.
And I believe the reporter problem dialog will suggest things that it thinks are duplicates. So you don't have to worry too much about that if you check against that little area.
All right, I think Ryan's next.
Then I shouldn't mute myself. Yeah. So I've talked about it a little bit before, but I've got some more to say about colorization. We have some totally new colors in Razor. On the left side, you can see our old colorization scheme for some reason with fewer pixels. Don't know how that happened. But you can see that it was a bit darker, even in dark mode, and it had these background highlighting around any sort of C# area. Our feedback seemed to indicate that the background highlighting made things a little harder to read. It also becomes a bit of a concern for accessibility if you have decreased ability to contrast colors, then highlighting ends up being a bit of a problem. So on the right, you can see our new colors. We've simplified it a fair bit. The directive colorization is a bit different than it was before. No highlighting, obviously, and that's it in dark mode. Here it is in light mode. Yep, same basic changes. One little quibble here is this darker yellow should be a lighter yellow, but working on it. So
this makes me happy partly because I remember showing this and showing these, like we did polls and we asked the community for input several times along the way, right? And I think that was helpful in terms of getting something that most developers are going to see and say, yeah, that looks really good.
Yeah, and the changes can look relatively small, but I think, I don't have any vision problems or anything, but I do think that the right side here does look more readable than the left side. But file feedback. Let us know if you disagree. Let's see. Other things that we did was improve readability. Here we have a link tag. Is this HTML or is this Razor? It's Razor because
because of that tilde, yeah.
Because of that tilde.
Well, okay, and the other thing that keys it for me is that purple on the link, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a screenshot from the old editor, and the link is not purple. New editor, we colorize that because we have more access to information about the state of the world. We can do things like that. So yeah, now you know when you're using a tag helper.
Very cool.
Another thing we did was increase the number and descriptiveness of classifications. So this is in the fonts colors dialog. You can see on the left here, there were only 4 classifications, and I will be very impressed if anyone knew that HTML server-side script was a thing we were using. But we were. And here on the left, you can see the new 2022 view where we're a lot more descriptive about what's going on. We've split the component attributes off from the tag helper attributes. We've split directives off from either. Yeah, so hopefully that is easier for everyone to understand and customize. We also, just to call back a little bit to what we saw before. Where are my GIFs playing? Apparently my GIFs are broken, but this should be...
if you click on them, no, I guess that advances.
Ryan, how are you playing the slideshow? You might have to go like edit in browser first and then play it from there.
Technical difficulties. Yeah, oh, okay. I don't know why the other one doesn't work. But here you can see the difference in speed. We mentioned earlier that we were working hard to increase the speed. As you can see on the left, there's a significant delay, about a half second, between each time I paste a tag helper instance and when it gets colorized. On the right, it's nearly instantaneous. That was like 5 different fixes that all added together into being a lot faster, and we are continuing to iterate on that just as fast as we can. And I guess I'm in this view now because I have other GIFs I think that won't work. Correctness. Obviously being wrong is like the worst thing we can do. So we did a lot of work to prevent things like that. This is just a bunch of random screenshots of incorrect things that the old editor did. Flashing of diagnostics was something that we saw repeated a lot. That should be improved. Scenarios where cross-language barriers caused diagnostics which were not really there, like this one where inside C# it's complaining about HTML things. Those should be resolved. This
Ryan, real quick, hit F11 to full screen your browser at least. There you go.
Thank you.
And then I think also in the bottom right corner, the little thing that's the projector button, I think your GIFs will still play.
Apparently not, but now they go. Okay. Yeah, so that kind of cross-language issue. Here's another instance of kind of cross-language issues where it's complaining about the C# in CSS context. That should be resolved. There were instances where your components weren't recognized in the older editors. That should also be fixed. And we also had problems with the wow, I really zoomed in on that, huh? I lost all the pixels. Where the escape operator was causing difficulty when used in certain HTML context. All of those should be fixed. So if you see any other sort of correctness problems, obviously go straight to that report an issue button. But yeah, hopefully that scenario is improved.
The bottom right, by the way, of that report, like that component definitely has a value. That was probably the #1 thing I saw from customers. Like people who were using it had that all the time. And the fact that we can say this is finally resolved is really exciting.
Yeah, and as I recall, the thing was that we never actually did figure out what caused it. It was just that when we modernized and moved to the LSP, it fixed it because we were in a more understandable system.
So to recap for people that like haven't followed the whole saga, like the original Razor editor was like, it's legacy code, and it's not. So this new language server protocol is a more like advanced. How would you like describe what's the elevator pitch for what is the LSP and how is it better?
I would say that the elevator pitch is you are targeting a prescribed shape, a prescribed endpoint, prescribed APIs, and that sort of guides you along a path that is more understandable. It also helps you, have the same experience across multiple editors. A lot of the changes that we do targeting Visual Studio, they end up doing nice things for VS Code. So I think those are the two main wins. It also allows for neat stuff like live share because it's an inherently client server based model. Being over a network doesn't mess things up.
One other piece that I would add is LSP, language server protocol, is asynchronous by default. So a lot of the perf concerns you'd have in the past, and you'd be typing, and next thing you know, your entire IDE would lock up, and it would hang, and it'd crash. Oh, it's not a thing anymore because it's asynchronous. It allows us to host it in more locations, and yeah, everything Ryan said. It's having a standard to abide by is a huge thing for an embedded language. The old editor didn't have that. So literally, as the C# team, as the TypeScript team, as the HTML team would produce features, guess what? They were building features without the idea of being hoisted into something else. And so if you happen to, in a C# file, if you add a using, you can't just add a using in a Razor file blindly. It's a different syntax. It's totally different. So things would explode. Editors would crash. So that's because we now have a standard for what those operations actually entail, and makes all that very, very understandable. And it's super appealing to an embedded language like Razor.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm hearing there is other language teams would come up with a cool feature, and then it would roll down, it would get dumped on the Razor team to say, now you need to implement this. Or customers would say, why can't I do this code that I can write in a C# file or whatever? And it was not thought through at the beginning of, this is going to need Razor support. And so this new protocol is designed for a systematic approach to that.
Yes. Yeah. It's a fair way to think. Every feature in the past used to be 5 different teams that have to agree on a feature. and now each team can implement LSP. And then we can choose to absorb it because it's LSP.
Cool. Yeah. It's also nice from the sort of platform perspective. When we make a suggestion back to Visual Studio, when we make an improvement for them or through them or because of something that we did, all the other languages that use LSP benefit from that as well. So.
Cool. Yeah, that's a big one. AKA once VS supports Codelins and LSP, you're gonna get Codelins in your C# portions of Razor files, and it will be like nothing for us to implement. So yeah, things no longer take months to deliver; they take like a week max.
Well, let's not make promises. There,
yeah,
Taylor.
I have a commitment there.
I said once. It's not there yet. So yeah.
So that was correctness. We've also got some nice quality of life features. Is that going to work? That does work. You can do things like go to definition. I've got here a Razor component that I have defined inside my project, and I can just right click, go to definition. Here I am in the file where it's defined. I can do that within the file as well, or I did that from the wrong direction. Right here. Obviously, you can also use F12, but you guys can't see me hit the F12 button, so that's not super helpful to you. I saw a bunch of people in the chat asking about navigating to background files. I believe that's F7.
Yes, F7 if there is one. Yep.
Yes, and David Winger added that, so we've. Did I say his name right?
He would say it's all correct.
Okay. Because you said it differently than I did, but he's never corrected me. Anyway, so there's some quick navigational features that we hope will make things nicer for y'all, and
that's really cool. Just I realized intuitively, I don't think of Razor as being a C#. I don't expect C# things like go to definition and that sort of thing, because I feel like I'm in weird Razor land, and I don't it's just an intuitive feel, you know what I mean? So I wouldn't have even thought to try that. And so it's cool to see this whole it's becoming a full-fledged editor for it's neat to see it all kind of fit together.
Yep. A few questions. Can you hit breakpoints, or can you put breakpoints into code blocks and Razor pages? Yes, you absolutely can do that. We're actually working on expanding that to even work in implicit expressions. Implicit expressions is just at datetime.now, for instance. We're working on making it so you can do that. This wasn't really supported before. Another question, what happens on components from libraries? Great question. We don't currently support navigating to those components if they're in the library. However, if you've written them yourself, we'll navigate to them, but we do need the source there. Eventually, you can imagine us decompiling it and showing you that, though.
There's a question before on just general discussion on language server support. Can this work with custom or other languages? Can somebody else plug into LSP?
Yeah, absolutely. LSP is a specification that anyone can plug into. Each IDE implements LSP differently. So you can think of LSP saying, if you try to like pull up a completion list, here is how you do that. So if an IDE like Visual Studio or VS Code or Visual Studio for Mac, if those say, I understand LSP, it means anyone who is abided by the spec can now provide a completion list in those IDEs. The value there is that, well, you write one server, a language server that implements this, and then you can run it anywhere because it's just a single standard. So yeah, you can absolutely do this. And this is, if you've used VS Code, this is actually how almost every single thing in VS Code is built. And we are pulling this like across many, many different products as well now too.
Nice.
Yeah. Cool.
That's it for me. I think Taylor's up next.
Yeah, go for it. All right. Oh, wrong thing. I'll do it here. Boom. All right. I guess I have a single slide. So we've gone over a lot of things, and really we have done so much in this area, and I could keep going through showing you more features. For me, I am bad at doing that. I'm nowhere near as good as Allison or Ryan at kind of showing off features like that. So for me, I kind of resonate better doing an example. So let's do a sample. Let's pretend the year is 2021. Well, I guess it is. The world is having a hard time. Well, it is. And I am a nice little developer who wants to save the world. So I want to build something that really resonates. Well, in Washington here, we have smoky weather days now where you can't go outside. So this is similar things to this are happening across the planet. So why don't I build a weather app? Let's see what this would look like in this new world. So I have a nice little weather website here that I've just put together. It's using the default template. I have just some scaffolded pieces. And as a random person who wants to save the world, what is your first step? So typically, one of the very most common flows that we see people do is they go ahead and they go to Stack Overflow and say, okay, well, how do I save the world? Well, like I want to create a weather forecast. And they grab some code, they copy and paste it, and boom, you now have some code in your project, and it all looks awful. Like it's just mangled in some various way. I saw people asking, how about formatting? Is that any better? Yeah, we have done so much work to make formatting better. And I say we, David Winger, who's not here, has really doubled down. And like him, all of us, we've all been like really putting so much effort into this area to make sure it's good. So if I go here and I format this document, advanced, I'm doing the same thing Ryan did because you can't see me hit Control KD. We can now format something that's super mangled to actually being coherent. Guess what? Turns out formatting 5 different languages, HTML, Razor, CSS, JavaScript, C#, and weaving them all together is a really, really hard problem to solve. Well, we have invested so much to make this quality. And as I scroll down here, well, I copied and pasted from Stack Overflow. I obviously have some errors. I am missing a using statement. So before you would copy this code and you'd bring it off into some C# file, you'd try and finding where the heck is my weather forecast? And it'd be a really big pain in the butt. Well, guess what? Now we have labels. So you can go ahead and do using statements. And as I said before, you can't just add a using statement. You can't just like add a C# using statement. There has to be an at in front of it, right? So we have that knowledge. We can do that now. So I can now magically bring in my weather forecast into this site. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this app here. And next thing you know, I want to see my weather forecast. Looks like I'm already up and running. Things are great, right? So the next really common flow, I'm running. The next really common flow that we see people do is they want to change their site. Well, guess what? We have hot reload now in .NET 6 apps. So if I wanted to, instead of C, if I want to go to Celsius, the second I save this file, and notice over here, I'm not going to hit refresh or anything. I'm going to hit save. It's going to go over here and it's going to go ahead and automatically re-render the right-hand side of the file. Great. I am now able to develop and work seamlessly. So this is a little low key. This is kind of plain, not the best weather website. So of course I go back to Stack Overflow. I say, I'm an open source developer. I'm only looking to work with open source components because that's what I really have a passion about. So I go to Google, I find the very first entry, and I go to some component vendor that is able to give some open source components. They have an example of how to save the world. So I go ahead and copy said snippet, go back to my site, and I can paste that in. Now, similarly to my last example, it's, you paste stuff in and things don't look as you want it to look. So you can format, we make it so you can format on the way, format document. Similarly, we now have warnings in your file. So that prior to the new editor, all these experiences would be razor errors, like diagnostics, and be kind of really jarring. We now provide warnings. And you'd have to know where to add using statements. Well, we have a light bulb for that. You can add a light bulb. Great. You can now use components a lot easier. I haven't saved the file yet. If I save it, over here, magically just updates, re-renders, and I'm still working. Now, this is pretty good. It's looking great, but I want my site to be very modern, right? This is not nearly modern enough for me. So I can go to my CSS, and not only with Razor files do we have hot reload, but we also have CSS. So I'm going to uncomment this. And I can go super modern in an instant, get my nice little flashing icons to make it so that anyone visiting my site is absolutely loving this experience.
A hot dog theme with Comic Sans.
Exactly. Who doesn't love it? So this is some of the examples of what we're offering with Hot Reload. Now, these are just some of the features. We've showed off a lot today on what you can do in a Razor file. And I showed off some light bulbs, but we're also trying to think of other things you can do. Like, we offer more than just the light bulbs I've showed. Like, you can use all the various light bulbs you know and love. We're also adding more Razor specific light bulbs where someone asks, can you extract code from one file to the next? We're working on this idea of like, okay, I grab this and extract this to another component. That we'd love to add. We don't have it yet, but we do know, on a similar note, that people love to separate their business logic from their UI. So we've added light bulbs to say extract a code behind. So I can go here and I pull all my C# and do another file, which is great. And then as Ryan mentioned, F7, go to page, lets me go back and forth to each of the files. So we're bringing back some of the features that existed before. On a similar note, we're doing other little things like making it so you can rename your components. So if I have a component app, I can go ahead and go here. I can rename it to whatever I want to. And I think someone had mentioned before, what the hotkeys were. So yeah, so Alt-H, by the way, is the hotkey for tag helpers. Alt-E is for elements. And I think that's it. I've saved the world. We have a weather forecast to tell everyone how hot it is to know not to go outside.
Wow.
And yeah, so these are some of the things we're really trying to better understand what is the daily flow for a developer and to make changes in that stead to say, can we make that life better? And I remember someone was saying, like, what about non-Blazor? Yes, all of this applies to non-Blazor as well. Like you get your light bulbs, your C# using light bulbs, you get all these pieces. Now, like renaming component, it's different outside of Blazors. Like obviously that doesn't translate, but you get the other pieces. All these apply more than just Blazor, but of course Blazor is a nice thing to have here as well. Hot reload included, by the way. So yeah, so that was my little build something to save the world. I think we already showed trying out and reporting issues. Click that report a problem button. I cannot tell you, there are so many people who think, they must know about this. No, we don't. Everyone is saying the same thing. We don't know about it unless you click the button. It's super unlikely we know about it. And please, yeah, if you do this, you will help us ensure that we deliver the best possible experience.
Even if we do know about it, it still helps us narrow and diagnose things because we can see, this is affecting people across this entire build, or we thought we fixed the problem, but it's still coming back, or you may think, this is an obvious problem, but you're using an extension, or you have a mismatch in your .NET version or whatever, right? And so it like, if in doubt, just report the problem. We can always close it,
Yeah, exactly.
So, wow.
So don't stay quiet. Please give feedback. Here is how to reach all of us. We are loving feedback. We are loving interacting with y'all. You've had so many great questions. Were there any questions, by the way, on the way?
There are more coming in. So there's,
Okay.
let me see. I don't know. I mean, so this is like features like, so Bulma is a, CSS library. I think the point at the level we're talking here, this is Razor. This would work with any CSS.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's agnostic to that. We have talked some about some changes with SPA interoperability that I think will help in general with that. Let me see. Question: when the features release? I don't know if we've officially said what the timeline is, but it's.
When do these features for VS 2022? Oh yeah. It'll be released when it's released. I don't know if we've said. I don't even think I know the answer to that question. I probably have access to find out what we think it might be, but I don't know if we have those answers. At the very least, go and try out the preview builds. The preview builds are available for everyone, and for me, I use it for even outside of like my day-to-day here at Microsoft. I also use it for that as well. It's pretty coherent and feels really, really fast and fluid.
Yeah. As you said earlier, with developer tools, I have a lot, like, especially if your code's in source control, it's very little, like, what's going to go wrong, honestly? Like, I mean, that's my personal opinion, but I mean, I run all the previews all the time. And especially with developer tools, it doesn't matter. The worst that happens is it crashes. And then I open the previous version and keep coding, So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's the only alternate is file an issue before doing that. But yeah, I totally get it, and I'm the same way too. I love living on the bleeding edge a little bit because these productivity features can really change what you do and really make you more productive. So
there's a question on hot reload. It's just kind of so there is a doc on turning on hot reload in existing projects. I forget.
So if you're done at 6, by the way, like this, where is my cursor? There it is. That's it. Like there's some pieces here, which is hot reload. Like there's these settings in here that say, okay, well, auto build and refresh when you save, auto reload, hot reload CSS. These are all I haven't changed any of these. These are just the defaults. So I don't know what, aside from having a latest SDK, and that's the big part here, right? Having an applicable VS SDK, which by the way, VS installs for you when you install VS 2022. And hot reload is only supported in VS 2022. So I would suggest you use that. So I think that would solve a lot of your concerns.
Yeah, and in case like it can be a little confusing. There's hot reload. There's been like .NET Watch and that sort of thing, but that reloads your entire project. Whereas this hot reload just diffs, so it just updates your code from diffs.
Yeah. Yep.
Question from Ed about extracting a component.
So we want that as well. we love that, and that's on our roadmap. It's one of these things where because we've kind of restructured how everything has worked, there's a million things we can do now. Guess what? We are trying to do 1.5 million things, and we can't even do that. And these are all wants. These are all things we would love to add, but we just haven't gotten to it yet. As honestly all it is, we just haven't gotten to it yet. But it's now possible, which is really exciting.
Cool. Let me see. The hot reload, I think, works with both Kestrel and IIS, doesn't it? I forget.
I believe it does. I think on like my options, I think that was a thing, wasn't it? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I wouldn't be the right person. I'm so sorry. Yeah. I'm not saying it doesn't. I just don't know.
Cool. Let me see. General question from Ben on the how performant Blazor and browser communication is.
So I'm assuming the question is about Blazor WASM since browser communication was added in there. Unfortunately, I'm also not the right person for that. Which is, yeah.
Let me see. So I think we already showed this. So jumping to a component with F12, go to definition. Yeah.
Yep, and that was what Ryan showed. Yeah, that was, you could go ahead and he right-clicked, went to definition, but F12, same thing. Yes, you could do that. Now, granted, it's only for ones in your project. We don't allow you to do external ones.
There's a question on just kind of general roadmap. Do you have like is there, public place, or what's the best way, other than watching these amazing shows, to keep up with the roadmap of what you're doing?
Yes, good question. So in terms of roadmap, we need to be better citizens and actually publish those things. We don't have one that's publicly available currently, to be totally honest. And I think a lot of that too is that things are moving so fast that we haven't landed on concrete roadmaps quite yet. Now we can be better. We can totally be better in doing that. And I think that's a room for improvement for us.
There is that, I shared earlier, the developer, well, actually, I don't think I shared it in an individual chat, but the developer community, just a second, I'm bringing that up. So that is where, when you submit feedback, that's where it goes to. And the that developer community, you can see in general, like, that's where a way to communicate with the team on specific issues, right? Yep. So there you can see how high things are rated, but you can also you can see if something's in development or kind of what step of the road it's in. So
yeah, and also I definitely want to mention, like, we're all like on the slide that's currently up too. We love like, if you're down to interact and really work through stuff with us, we would love to talk and figure problems out. I cannot tell you how valuable it is to kind of work with people hands-on. There was a question that I saw. The Control RR rename got changed to a tooltip box. I really like the WYSIWYG preview. Is there a reason, Mike? What a great question. Yeah, there totally was a reason. Two folds actually. First one, the old WYSIWYG where like you hit rename in a C# file and it would just it would show you the preview of where it would change elsewhere, was really fragile in Razor scenarios. Actually, there's so much that can happen as you're typing that in an embedded language scenario, that functionality would frequently break. And we had loads of reports of people saying, I tried renaming something and it trashed the rest of my document. How awful is that, right? I would never want to trash the rest of your document. That is the opposite of what we want. So that's motivation one. Motivation two is that the language server platform bit in Visual Studio defers to this model initially, but that is looking to be changed in the future. So I'm not saying it's impossible, because it's definitely possible with our current architecture, but we took an immediate swap to it because of the issues that were with the old model.
Very cool. Well, that was a ton of stuff. We're at time. It was, I always love every time that I'm able to get your team on, to show stuff off, because there's just tons of great demos and tons of mind-blowing things. So this was amazing. Big takeaway, grab the preview and start using VS 2022, report a problem, and love the new features. And
and does it work for Maui? Yes, it does work for Maui. Yes.
Woo!
Yep.
That is exciting.
Cool
okay.
Stuff.
Well, very cool. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to the next time we have you on. Yep. It's exciting to see as you're like unblocking, and a lot of things that people in the past had said, hey, I would love to see this, or I'd love to see this. And it's nice to see all these things light up. So
yeah, we're super excited too, because oh my goodness, VS 2022 has just enabled us to go so much further and make things so fluent and feel good and fast. And oh my goodness, love it.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. And thanks a lot to the Razor team.
Cool.
Bye.